Hello friends, and welcome back to the cabin. This was actually dead standing. It had been for about 4 years, so I finally decided to go ahead and take it down, and some of this is still a little bit hard. Made it down close to the base. What happened when I backfilled, it caused the tree to die because I got too far up on the trunk, but at least it won't go to waste. We'll be able to burn it down here, and when I get that all split up, that'll make quite a bit. Well, that worked up into quite a little bit right there, friends. So now we'll get this stacked up where it can dry, and we'll have, I don't know, maybe fires for 2 or 3 weeks right there. Yeah, this made quite a little bit. We'll have fire for a long time. And this is really dry too, so that's going to help out getting those fires started in there and getting on with the day. Well, this is the last of it, so I did pretty good without having to start a new pile. Well, good morning. I'm going to run up here and feed the chickens, and then I've got a problem down there at the sawmill before I saw anything else up, which I'm thinking I'm going to saw up a bunch of 2x2 stock so that I can start framing in some shelving and workbench and stuff like that down there at the workshop. But before I do any more cutting, I think that I need to check that blade guide arm. So when I get this done, we'll run down there and put a tape measure on it. So the other day when I was making the final cuts on this trim work that we've been using in the workshop here, this blade guide arm safety bar right here, which is just connected right here on the front with a little bracket, and then runs over here, and it just slides in and out as you pull the guide arm in and out, right? So the other day when I was making my last pass, the very bottom of this caught the board, and it was pushing back on this because the motor was trying to drive my head forward. And so I need to check the measurement. I got it stopped real quick before it did any damage, but what could have happened was this blade could have jumped off of here and could have caused all kinds of problems. But anyway, let's put a tape measure on there and check it out. Since our arm is pretty much extended as far as it can go, I'm going to take a measurement from according to the manual, from the top of this head down to our blade guide arm measures 8 15/16. Now we're going to run it in the opposite direction till we get within a ½ inch of the other side. Okay, measuring this side right here, we've got 8 7/8. So that tells me we're about a 1/16 of an inch off. Alright, according to the manual right here, this is blade guide arm alignment, okay? First thing that it says to do is remove the front cover from the blade guide arm assembly, which has 4 bolts on the front. Alright, so we got the debarker moved around there. The next thing the book talks about is opening this up to get to a couple of bolt heads then I need to take loose right here to drop this bottom pan down right here. Do you remember maybe in some videos where you heard the sawmill as I was running it kind of making a sound? I don't remember how to explain it, but it was just a bumping sound. If you see this right here, I've got that camera over there zoomed in. I can't really turn this wheel, but that bolt right there come through far enough to touch the back side of this right here. If there was any slight wobble to it as it was going around, it would hit that right there. So what I did was I moved this over and I ground the end of that off, and now it's quiet. It doesn't do that. Okay, so this is the only 4 bolt on the face of anything, even though we're on the back side, that I could find. So we're going to take these loose, get them off. So now you can see the actual mechanism that runs that arm in and out. These pulleys, upper and lower, right there, guide this bar in and out. And there's some adjustments that you can make on those. But you got to be very careful when you start loosening, especially those bolts right there. Because right back here in the very back, this nut right here works off of a cam system. So the top side is much larger than the bottom side right there. So when you turn it, okay, this nut could end up farther below what you're doing or closer to what you're doing as you turn it. Trust me, because when I was setting it up the first time when I first got it, I got that out of whack, and it took me, I think, almost a week to get those things adjusted to where that thing, it wouldn't even run the arm in and out. It took me that long to get that adjusted, so you got to be careful on that. Alright, since I'm going to be around this blade and I'm going to be on the inside here, and those may be tight, I'm going to put the gloves on just in case we slip off. So what I'm going to do is get this behind here. Alright, that one's loosened. You see that? Here's the end of that I had to grind off right there. Clean this off with this best I can, then I'll blow it off. We can take this bottom plate off. I know it's a cover and it's got holes in the bottom of it, but it looks like a catch-all to me, doesn't it, you? Here, we'll brush that off too. Clean it out while we're in there. Alright, right here's a better shot on how these things work. You can see how the nut sticks out a lot farther away from the bolt than it does on the opposite side right there. That's because this is kind of like a cam. So what you do is you loosen, okay, the bolt or the nut. You loosen the nut and then you turn that, and it tightens it up or loosens it up, whatever it is, that adjustment that you're looking for, and then you tighten those back in that position and it will hold it there. So the cam works to adjust things up and down. And all 4 of them work alike. Well, good morning. I had company yesterday when I was working on the sawmill, so I just stopped everything to visit with them. So we've got a really nice morning out here, but it is cold. Go ahead and make a fire. That way I come in here and warm up my hands and get that sawmill fixed so that we can start sawing up some 2x2s to get some framework for all of the benches that we're going to build and need. Alright, to adjust that, it says to start on one side and do the uppers and lowers and then move to the other side if you need to. So since I thought this would be more difficult to work on, I decided to work on these over here. Now I've also tightened these up a little bit because that bar, I could just barely move it. But now look what happens. When I try to move the bar over here, nothing happens. But yet, I can take my hand and move it in and out. Well, it quit raining long enough for me to take you down here and show you the progress that I have made on the sawmill, which is absolutely none. Except I did take off yesterday afternoon because when I was working on trying to get the blade guide arm aligned with the blade, the wrench actually slipped, and I'll tell you, I may end up losing the nail on the left hand, the thumb, and the left or the right hand middle finger is very, very sore. So I understand what my son gets so concerned about when you're trying to learn how to play guitar, and your hand that you chord with, very important. So yeah, the whole base of it's black, blue, so may end up losing that. But let me show you what I'm talking about. After I did the adjustments with the blade guide arm in and out so that it measured the same distance on each side, I got within about maybe a 32nd to a 16th of an inch. Okay, that's really, really close. Now I was finally able to get this also within a 16th of an inch on this side as the same as it is on this side, so that it's running parallel with the blade. But unfortunately, the arm will not drive itself in and out. I can take and actually manually move it, but it will not drive itself in and out. So let me show you something else that I was able to do. This side right here, compared to the other side over there, was inset just a little bit. So I brought it out so that the measurement between the body and the pulley on all four of these is the same. So then why won't it go in and out? I have no idea. When I over there and I hit the switch, it sounds like the little wheel is turning on the motor back here, but the chain is not grabbing and allowing it to drive. Now I'm just wondering, even though I can push it in and out by hand, Do I have it too tight or not maybe tight enough? The book doesn't make any reference to that. So probably what I'm going to have to do is call Wood Mizer and find out if they've had any issues with this, and if so, what the remedy would be. These bolts right here, I also went through and loosened this up and ran all the bolts through there so that the heads of them, or the distance between here and the end of the bolt, would be about the same on all four of those. Now this one right here is the one that I had to grind off because it was sticking out a little bit farther because it was hitting the back side of the wheel. Some of the videos where it was kind of making a knocking sound, that's where that was coming from. I finally figured it out. So I ground the head of it off, and like I said, it doesn't knock anymore. I think it was causing just enough vibration on the blade when it was cutting that the wheel might just, you know, ever so slightly wobble and was touching the end of that bolt right there. So I just kind of ground it off a little bit and no more problem. Even though I could run the bar in and out manually where it needed to be, I don't want to do that because I want it to be able to work, right? So I'm gonna, I guess, call them and find out, because could I have those little wheels back there too tight on that blade guide arm, or not tight enough, or just, you know, what am I missing here? Because I've tried to cover all the steps and make sure. The only thing that I didn't do is make sure that my blade was cutting actually straight horizontal and flat level, which I'm going to do that, but I got the blade guide arm straight. So the next thing I have to do with all of these screws right here, we will adjust this blade to make sure that it's cutting exactly level. Then I have to adjust the rollers to make sure that they're tracking properly on the blade. And then the only other thing that we need to do is make sure that it's putting a 1/4 inch deflection down on the blade, which makes it cut really nice and straight. So those are the only other things that we need to check. But I need to really figure out, why does this motor not work when I run it in and out? I think since it's so nasty outside the rest of the day, I may just kind of lay low, let the hand heal a little bit, and run in there and call Wood Mizer and see if they've heard any stories, or they can tell me why will that not drive itself in and out. Like I say, I've been through the whole book and I just can't figure it out myself, so I think it's about time to call them. Well, good morning. The gas company was here and filled my tank up. That may last me until spring, but heading back out here to the sawmill. Got my trusty manual with me. I did speak with Wood Mizer, where we purchased this, which was basically the Central Plains, and they really couldn't tell me, other than what the book was telling me, on how to adjust this motor or to get it to where it would drive in and out. I was even telling them about the frustration that I had on the tools. Let me explain what I'm talking about. Alright, so we've got an 1 1/8" wrench, and that's the size of this nut back here, but when you get that in there, you barely can go forward or backward because you don't have much travel room. So to me, that's kind of a bad design to be able to get that wrench in there. This one you can kind of get to fairly easy, like this one, but these two inner ones makes it almost impossible, especially for this one on the top, because of this bar that's in the way. You can't really get to it. So I thought to myself, you know what I'll do? I'll call my buddy Nathan Elliott from Out of the Woods, because he's got a sawmill. He's had several, and he kind of knows his way around the block when it comes to sawmills. So I called him, told him my problem that I was having and what they had told me, and he started laughing. He said, "Richard, let me tell you what I do when I have a problem." He said, "The best person that I have found that could pretty much answer any question that I throw at them," he dropped me the name, and Wood Mizer in Pennsylvania. So I called him today and didn't get the guy that he was talking about, but got another guy who gave me a lot of information, plus another guy that just called me back at random later on, said, "Can I help you?" So I'll tell you what, folks, this is what they told me. I told him, I said, you know, I really don't even know what my starting point is. I said I had some things that were kind of out of line. I loosened them up, I straightened everything out where it all measures kind of like the same. Gives me what I would think would be a good starting point. I said, but I'm having issues with it not, I think I've got things lined up, but it's not driving the arm in and out. So this is what they told me to do. He said, this is what I do when I put those in. He said, I need to take this wheel off. I need to take this wheel. He said, take those off so that when you tension this blade up right here, there's nothing touching it. Go ahead and put your 1700 psi on the blade, and that gives you a reference to start from as far as the blade being horizontal and set. He said once you tighten it up, be sure and rotate it and make sure it's tracking properly on the belts. And then the wheel or the blade will pretty much be set where it's supposed to be. Then you can do all of your measurements. Once you get that accomplished, he said then you want to go ahead and put these wheels back on, and making sure that they deflect your blade 1/4 of an inch in the downward direction, and make sure that they're tracking on your blade properly. And then by all rights, in theory, that should drive your arm in and out. It may need a little bit minor adjustment, but here's something else that I was told. And then this nut right here is your adjustment screw to take the slack out of that. By cranking that down, it pulls the motor up. Well, it's all the way up in the very top position. So what I need to do is I need to take these cams, I showed you how that operates, and I need to make sure they're pointing in the opposite directions, because if they're facing inward, that leaves slack in the chain. As I point them outward, it rotates everything, pushing it this direction, which would actually, in essence, take up slack out of the chain. So as far as a horizontal type of an adjustment, this is how you do that. So I told him, I said, well, before we go any farther, I said, let's just go ahead and hang up here. I said, I'm going to go down and I'm going to start all over, because I did not know to take these wheels off. The book doesn't say anything about that. It didn't really say anything about tensioning that blade up either, but it does make sense that you want your blade in the position so that you can do all your measurements from that, right? That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and take those wheels off, and we'll get them out of there. We'll tension the blade up and we'll start over. Then if we have any problems, we can always call Wood Mizer back. And he said if you've got an iPhone where you can FaceTime me, he said being able to see it might help us out a whole lot more. So let's try that. Alright, let's see if we can get this one loose. And we get this side off. Alright, here they are, just like they came off. This was on the drive side and this is on the idle side. Alright, I think what I need to do now is take and loosen these up and adjust them all to where they're facing out and they're kind of facing opposite of each other. That way they're turned where they're putting pressure on my arm, but yet they're extended all the way, taking out as much slack as possible. So I think what I'm going to do is take about half of this back out. That way when I adjust those, I don't run into the tension that this is going to give me. So I'm going to back that off some and adjust these to where, like I said, they're all facing out and the cams are in this direction. I went ahead and turned this top one around. I thought I would try to video this one for you right here. See if I can get that on there. Trying to turn that where it faces the opposite direction. Kind of like that, maybe. That way these two bolts are in the upper corners, or in the far corners, because before it was more over in here. So you know what, friends, I'm going to try to make sure that these are up against the bar snug, but with just that adjustment right there and me taking the slack out of that drive chain, it may not jump up and down anymore when I turn the motor, because it was like skipping on the chain. So let me kind of tighten these up against that bar a little bit and we'll give it a shot. Alright, so I've got this motor removed back here, and now you can see the slack right here. I was able to take up quite a bit because this actually touched the bottom of this one earlier. Okay, I'm actually attaching this motor to the back. There's my YouTube playing right on time. So I'll get this back on there. Get this cog lined up where it needs to be, which I believe is right there. And then we'll put some adjustment on this and tighten our chain up now. Well, friends, let's test it out real quick like. Cross your fingers. Oh, hey, check it out. I know it's kind of hard to see back in there, but that is the very top of the electric motor, the cog right there. There's the top of the chain, and you can see I'm a good 3/8 of an inch down from the top now, so I took out a whole lot of slack out of that. Alright, I've got all those nuts tightened back up, so now let's take all of our measurements and make sure that we're the same height, extended, and running parallel along with our blade, but we need to tighten this blade up, put some tension on it. Okay, so we want to turn it over just a little bit to make sure that it's tracking properly on our wheels. You just need to make sure that you got about 1/8 of an inch sticking out past your wheel, because that puts the center of your blade in the center of your wheel. We also have the same distance on the other side over here. Friends, you ain't gonna believe this, but from this side right here measuring over to this side, I now have it within a 32nd of an inch. It's just like almost spot on. So now what we need to do is measure the distance between the blade here and this way. Alright, so measuring the distance between here and then over here, I've got about a 1/16 of an inch. It's in closer, but I'm not sure. I believe if I tighten these back up now, because I had them loose, especially on this side, what it will do is it will pull this side in and push that side out the direction that it needs to go. So why don't we try that? I believe when I do that, we'll be spot on in all angles. Get the top one tight. I guess you guys can see this. I've got this where we're right at 10 3/8 from the bottom of our saw head to our blade right here on both sides. So we know that we're going horizontal. It's actually level. But what I need to do is make sure that when we put our rollers back on here that we have an 1/8 or a 1/4 of an inch deflection. So it needs to measure 10 5/8 once we get those put on. Alright guys, I don't know if you can see this down here, right here now, but we've got 10 5/8. Alright guys, what I didn't show on camera was, I just got through adjusting these two rollers right here. They have to be kind of cockeyed just a little bit, kind of facing this direction. Then the gap between the back of the blade here and the corner of your wheel, I adjusted the camera a little bit better, but the back side from the blade to the edge of this wheel right here on this side should measure 1/8 of an inch, and then over here on this side they want this corner over here a 1/16 of an inch. Now that's according to the specs on the book. Also Wood Mizer will tell you the same thing, and down there at Hobby Hardwood I've heard him say that before. So there is a 1/16 of an inch difference between the drive side and the idle side over here. Just remember it's a 1/16 of an inch on the drive side, and if you have one of these mills, and it's 1/8 of an inch over here. Like I say, they got to be cocked just a little bit. So once you get that set, it has something to do with the tracking, the way that the blade goes around, I guess, so that it doesn't jump off as easy. But in case the blade gets pushed back, the very corner of the wheel kind of keeps the blade from jumping off, instead of it just going straight back if everything was running parallel. But that's my logic, so don't trust me, trust them. But anyway, let's check it one more time and see if our repair, everything seems to measure correctly now. We've got the 1/4 inch deflection on both sides, so let's see if it'll drive in and out. Well, friends, I didn't plan on this video being all about this sawmill, but I will tell you this. If this sawmill is down, that kind of puts a standstill to everything that we do up here, because we pretty much just build up here, right? So when this thing is down, you just have to kind of go along with me until we get it fixed. So, but it appears like we did get it fixed. I won't have to call Wood Mizer back, or maybe I should, and say thank you for the information that they gave me from the Pennsylvania Wood Mizer. So if you got a problem, if you got a Wood Mizer sawmill, my suggestion is to follow Nathan and that guy that I mentioned, Marty. Nathan says he knows quite a bit. So if you got an issue that you really can't figure out, then there you go. Because somebody somewhere has run into your problem before, and there's not a lot of videos on YouTube about the LX150. There is one other guy that I found that has one of these, but you know, you pretty much got to run into an issue with one of them if you want to find a video that somebody's had posted on YouTube. So when this one goes online, at least they'll kind of have an idea, if they run into the same problem, the steps that they have to go through in order to fix it. But friends, thanks so much for stopping by. I'm going to go ahead and cut the video here so that next time we're up and running with the sawmill, I think we're either going to work on this, getting this power across the ditch here, and we'll also start, well, we got the fence to do, and we've also got some 2x2 stock that we're going to have to cut up for the workbenches in here. But thanks so much for stopping by. We certainly do appreciate it. And folks, we'll see you again next time here at the cabin.